Good evening, everyone. Hello. Yeah, I hope you can hear me because I can hear you very well. All right, we waited a few minutes just to get the smokers in. Well, welcome everyone to Penang Institute, to the first Penang Institute event of the year, really. And this room during Christmas and New Year was actually repainted, the floors have been changed and so on. So this new look I hope you appreciate it. What is also special about this one seminar today is that this conference hall is of course newly renovated. Importantly, though, this is the second GTLF Plus event. Now we held the first on 25th of September with Dr. Ong Jin Tiong, and that was a launch of his book on cooking called The Taste of Home: Easy to Cook Dishes from Singapore and Malaysia. And that was a book written sort of for Malaysians living overseas who wanted to eat Penang food. And, the book was about how you could get the alternative ingredients and how to cook them easily and so on. So that sort of set the tone, if you like. But that was also part of our idea when we took over the Georgetown Literary Festival, that we would use the brand GTLF throughout the year, and we would call it GTLF Plus. And with that, we then want to highlight certain seminars that we hold here or elsewhere for its special significance for Penang people and for the history of Penang. So the first one we held last year was on food. The second one is the one today. And of course, in between, we organized the Georgetown Literary Festival, which we themed Word on the Street. I'm sure some of you attended it. And I thought personally that it was a great success. It was very well done by the new team that I put in charge. And we will continue doing that. We've sort of taken over GTLF, the brand and everything, and the festival. This year, we've just decided, or I've just decided at dinner today, that the theme for this year is going to be urban myths and memories. So we'll see where that leads us in our thoughts. Yeah. So you notice the trend is to focus on local Penang culture, its past, its present, and its future. We continue that line of thought today. We continue with the GTLF Plus initiative with this very much anticipated event. We have the highly respected hotelier, Mr. Chris Ong, and renowned collector of Peranakan artifacts, joining us to provide insights into the material world of the Chinese Peranakan, its past, its present, and its future. I shall hand the floor over now to Gareth Richards, whom I think all of you would know, from Gerak Budaya. And Gerak Budaya and Gareth, of course, are our usual collaborators on matters relating to books. The floor is yours, Gareth. Enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ki Beng, for those warm words of introduction. And I've got some thanks to make at the very outset as well. Thanks, as always, to the Penang Institute team doing a marvelous job. Thank you to Duri, who's going to be flogging the books to you. By the way, special offer. The book costs 280, but if you buy a second book, we give you discount. It's been agreed with Chris, so. Okay, we'll give you a discount later. And thank you all for coming out on a Monday evening. It's really wonderful to see so many people here tonight. Old friends, I don't mean that by age, I mean that by longevity, and also new friends. So a very, very warm welcome to you all. As Ki Beng says, I'm Gareth Richards. I think I own Gerak Budaya Bookshop. And as he said in his introductory remarks, today's event is being sponsored under the banner of GTLF Plus. Now, although he said a few words already about that, I want to actually add a little bit more because I think he was being far too modest. Some of you will know that 8 or 9 months ago, the Georgetown Literary Festival, which is an award-winning festival, was under severe jeopardy. In fact, its very existence was called into question. And in fact, it was Ki Beng who actually stepped forward into the breach and said, we'll take over the management of the festival, we'll find private sector funding, and I'll put together a team that will actually curate and shape the festival. And I also would like to endorse what you said. I think it was a very, very successful festival in its own right. There were some really first-class panels, wonderful speakers, some of you who were present at Tan Tuan Eng's quite brilliant opening speech. The marketplace was lively and vibrant, as we would wish it for. And so initially, our thoughts were that the festival would be a kind of transition into a new format and in a new direction. But in fact, the reality is that I think it was very successful in its own right. And one of the things that Ki Beng and I were discussing over some time is how can the festival have a presence other than at the 4 days of the year where the festival itself takes place. And one of the problems, it's not a criticism, but it's one of the issues, was that for 10 years, the directorship of the festival was always with somebody based in Kuala Lumpur. And the tendency was they would come in, they would parachute in, stay for 4 days or so, and then they would leave. And it would be left to small publishers or bookshops like ourselves, as well as Penang Institute, to try and keep some kind of sense of a literary world and so on. So I think that the idea of a GTLF Plus, where we actually can use the brand or the hook to maintain a constant presence of the world of books, I think is an excellent idea. So Ki Beng, I think you and your team at Penang Institute are very much to be commended. So tonight's event is taking place under that particular rubric. Let me just give you an outline of the format of the event. We're actually going to start off with a short and extremely beautifully made film, which is about the making of the book, the Chris Ong Collection. And I think it's a very nice point of entry for all of you to share that sense of the making of the book. And one of the things that will come across is that although it's absolutely Chris's book, his collection, and so on, all books are in the end collaborative arrangements. So you'll see there the work that went into writing and editing and photography and design to bring this absolutely delightful book into the world in search of its readers. After the video, I'll introduce Chris. Chris will do an illustrated talk. Then there'll be a kind of short conversation session between Chris and myself. And we really want to open up the floor for questions and comments from you. So that will be the shape of the evening. And then, of course, we'll round off. And Chris has very generously said he will sign books free. And so you'll have that opportunity later on. So we'll start the evening with this short video. It's 6 or 7 minutes long on the making of the Chris Ong Collection. Thank you. need to start at the beginning. Can't hear it. It's on YouTube if you don't have it on the file. It's on YouTube.
The speakers.
The project that we are doing at the The project that we are doing at the moment is to collate and archive Chris's collection. So part of the Georgetown Heritage Collection that we have. So it's all the Peranakan antiques that we have in the hotels.
Suppose I've been asked, do I know what I have? Do I know what I own? And I can't really give a definitive answer. I sort of have an idea, but I don't really know where they are or how many of them I have. So it started as a project to document and archive the main collection, what I consider to be my permanent collection. And when I started doing that project, I discussed it with my media person, Nikki, and he thought it was a good idea to, while you're doing that work, photographing it and trying to do a QR code for something to find out where it is, why not put a little bit more effort to create a book so that we can say that these things were here at this point in time.
I'm working with Nikki, so I'm the background guy doing all the setups, you know, and trying to work out what looks good and what has to be included in the collection, because Chris's collection is vast, it's huge, and we are quite selective to show what should go in this book.
The book took exactly 1 year to make, and it was created and conceived in the most unconventional way possible, because you're supposed to do the text layout first, but we went the opposite way. First, we had a collection of photographs put together, put into the layout, and then I did the transcripts and the interviews with Chris. And this opened him up to tell these beautiful stories about his childhood, his formative years, and from the times that he began collecting. And I think this was the factor that really breathed life into this book. So the result is like a coffee table book / memoir. And it was really a wonderful experience to create it with all its hardships.
I had a couple of streams of major things I was collecting. Obviously, porcelain is one of them because Peranakan families and Peranakans in general are obsessed with the colorful porcelain. And when you see it in the book, you'll realize how amazing and uplifting it is when you see it en masse.
Trying to align things so that it looks good in the photograph for the book, getting the balance right in terms of the background so that
for example, on this table, this is where we did the tok panjang, the double page tok panjang, and then the spoons, when the spoons pointing in one direction into the center, and just an incredible experience to work with Colin. He's the best at this.
So that was the, I think, a very nice short film on the making of the book. And you can see the amount of collaborative work, even actually right up to Nikki checking the page proofs as they were coming off from the printer. And I'm very pleased to say that two of the principals involved in the making of the book, Colin Yap and also Nikki Almasi, the photographer, are both with us here tonight. And I'm sure later they'll have something to say about the making of the book. So now I'd like to introduce our main speaker for tonight's talk. Well, he's a fifth generation Baba from Penang. And Chris Ong will be known very well to many of you as a pioneer in the heritage boutique hotel sector here in Penang. I'm sure some of you will have eaten at his wonderful Kabaya restaurant at Seven Terraces. But then there's also Muntri Muse and Muntri Grove and the Jawi Peranakan Hotel as well. And of course, before he returned to Penang, having been away for 30 years, he also had the award-winning Galle Fort Hotel in Sri Lanka, which was recognized to very great acclaim. So since returning to Penang after being 30 years away, Chris has focused much of his time on his very deep, passionate appreciation of Peranakan material culture as a kind of, I guess, a kind of guardian of the shared history and of the social traditions and the family customs associated with that material culture. I often think we know people better not only from what they've achieved and what they like, but also what are their pet peeves. And I read a wonderful interview with Chris, and I'd just like to share with you some of Chris's pet peeves to see if we're on the same page. So here goes. Here's half a dozen of them. Chris doesn't like big rats, nor dirty clogged drains, nor blocked 5-foot ways, traffic problems, the lack of parking in Georgetown, delays in council approvals for renovations, and last but not least, he can't stand over-restored heritage buildings by Singaporean developers. Please give a very warm welcome to Chris Ong.
Just a minute. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this talk tonight. And thank you to the Penang Institute team and Ki Beng for being here, and also to Gareth from Gerak Budaya for making this event possible. And to you who have messed up your dinner time, as well as missed the start of the inauguration, to be free listening to me tonight. It's always a bit nerve-wracking to present to an audience with an open mic at the end, but I will do my best to give you insights into the book that you might miss when you're reading it. This is my first book, I have to say, and I hadn't realized how difficult it was to create and finish the book. It's easy to create, but to finish it is really something else. And I have to give my special thanks to Nikki and Colin, who were integral to the production team, to push, nudge, and sometimes drag me along to complete the book. So thank you once again. The short video presentation you saw was not all just pretty and fun. It's really a lot of work, especially for Nikki, when he had to redo a lot of the photographs that I'm not happy with. So thank you for having the patience to do that. It gives you a peek into my obsession with perfection and the passion that has gone into creating this book. It started off as an idea to archive what I've got, and but it developed into much more than that. It became something that I think one would refer to in a decade and still see that it's still as relevant as today. When I look back at how many books on Straits Chinese porcelain there have been published over time in Malaysia, on average, one gets published every 10 years. With the first one in 1982 by the Southeast Asian Ceramic Society, and the one before mine was in about 2010 by Li Mingyue. So it's interesting to see how each of us have collated and presented our collection. And I like to think that the review given by Johnny Wong, who heads our Ceramic Society, about the breadth and the width of my collection, gives it enough credence for the book to stand on its own. So the structure of this evening's talk has been outlined by Gareth, but I want it to be quite informal, and so we'll only take questions at the end, right? Okay, we'll take questions at the end. And I will talk about the reasons why I developed this OCD compulsion for collecting Straits Chinese material heritage. I've got a lot of other OCD compulsions as well. And it will be followed by anecdotes and stories behind the items from each section of the book when I present the visuals. So I thought about it deeply, about why I developed this obsession to collect porcelain. So it goes back to my childhood. And at a subconscious level, I will always advise people to be aware of what you expose your child to. My granny or Ama came to live with us when I was very young, about 3 or 4 years old, and assumed the role of matriarch in our household, as all Nonya ladies tended to do. And she filled my head with dramatic stories of loss and tragedy. This was embedded in my subconsciousness from then on. And I was on a mission from a very young age to avenge her losses and restore her rightful position and possessions. This was my obsession, and I had a perfectly rational explanation until one day an inner voice whispered, "It's more than enough." I think I focused on the more rather than the enough in that sentence and did not pay heed to that voice. Imagine what I could have done if she had filled me with stories of triumph and success and leadership and community work. You might be watching my inauguration instead tonight. Seriously, at a conscious level, I returned to my hometown just a few years before the inscription of Georgetown by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. I started to restore a few heritage buildings for adaptive reuse. That's another story for another day. Into heritage boutique hotels. I was scouring the region to fit out my first project in Georgetown, which is my home, actually, which is still my home today, 20 years later. I visited the esteemed Peranakan Museum in Singapore, which opened its doors in 2008. And I was totally knocked out by the beauty and extensive examples and display of Straits Chinese material culture. There were many galleries dedicated to porcelain, textiles, furniture, and the display of intangible traditions associated with births, weddings, and funerals. It was truly spectacular, and it's the first of its kind in the world. When you look at Georgetown, if you wanted to go to a state museum with a display of Peranakan culture, Chinese culture, I think it would be hard pressed to find one. Actually, there hasn't been a state museum for quite a while. So that visit sparked my passion in my culture, and I was excited and alarmed at how much of it still existed, especially in Singapore museums. So in my own little way, I started the journey to assemble together a collection that would stay in Georgetown. Today, what is represented in the book is more than half of my collection. And as Colin had mentioned, it was difficult to choose what was included and what wasn't. The book was already 270 pages and weighs 2 kilograms. 2 kilograms. And I wanted it to be produced beautifully. And so it was a matter of cutting things out rather than adding things in. So at the end of the day, I'm very happy to have with the end product. And even though Nikki had to sit at the printers day after day to make sure that the colors came out just right, I think that it was worth the extra effort.
one of the things that so as I said earlier, it was basically to keep a lot of the material culture in Georgetown, as it was just departing our shores rapidly. Did I have any regrets about the decision to start this collection when I came back to Penang? I wish, of course, that I had that epiphany much earlier, but then I wouldn't have had the finances and the disposition to have been so focused on assembling the collection. So one of my mottos is never regret and never procrastinate. And they're ongoing lessons for me. I think that the pursuit and assembly of the collection was not entirely altruistic. Sometimes I had the pleasure and fun just for the pursuit of pure beauty and perfection in my eyes. So that doesn't sound like I always have such a higher strategy for assembling the collection, but it is going to be shared with the public at some stage. And I don't know whether you are aware, but we have an exhibition every Heritage Day in the Georgetown at Seven Terraces for parts of my collection. And last year was our 8th year, and it will keep on going every year as long as I'm around. So I will go through some of the visuals that you'll find in the book and talk about why they are special to me and what makes them stand out. So I'm supposed to point this here, right? Oh, okay. Okay, well, let me practice doing this for a while. Here. Can you show me how it's done? Which direction? Sure. Oh, so not that. So not there. Pointing where? Pointing there. Oh dear. Maybe have the lights down. Yeah. Okay, so I have to turn my back to some of you. There's a trick to this. Pointing to here. Oh, sure. All right. So we're starting off. The first visual there is a selection of kamchengs. Now, the colors there look like a riot, but I find them incredibly beautiful and bold. I think if you think about 19th century women, and the women were behind the purchasing of all these porcelain items, to have the courage to actually go forward to acquire all these magnificent colors that if you think about the British administration at the time, I think they would consider these colors quite garish. But they were confident enough in themselves to get the porcelain made in Qingdezhen to the specific color matches and color combinations. Don't ask me if I have a favorite. It's like Sophie's choice. I can't make up my mind. So the colors actually were very different from the South, which is Malacca and Singapore. The orders and by the Straits Chinese women in the South are quite different from the ones in the North. So we tended to have more greens and pinks up here, whereas down in the South, they're much more a mixture of colors. So I collect also all sizes, and I focus mainly on kamchengs when I started to collect because they were the most iconic symbol of Peranakan porcelain. So it was a strategic focus on kamchengs, and I think I would have over 100 kamchengs at this point in time, just the colored ones. So why are these special? They're special because they're quite big and they are a mirrored pair. Now, there's no reason to collect two of the same. It's just excess, but a mirrored pair is something else. So, and they're from, this pair is from Penang, and originally ordered or acquired by the Lim Kechuan family. There's a Kechuan Road in Penang, actually. So he was a illustrious Chinese businessman that also became a prominent rebel against the colonial forces. So when he was kicked out or not allowed to play in the Esplanade for his sports, he got together a group of his friends to create or to found the Chinese Recreation Club, or the CRC. So not only was he a sportsman, he was cultured as well. So the art on this pair of kamcheng is especially good. They only use the best artisans on the bigger ones. And if you look at the cartouche there, the cartouche is the window. It's a very odd shape. I tried to do research into finding out what that shape was called and what it represented. And there was no reference at all. So I think I have the right to call it what I wanted. So I called it the Baroque bat design. And I think that explains it all because the shape looks very much like a bat. And also it reminds me of Baroque shapes. So how did I acquire a pair of such perfection? Well, it was just being pure luck. They were acquired not as a pair. They were acquired individually about 5 years apart. One was from Singapore, the first one I acquired. And that was an anonymous seller from a dealer. But the second one came from a friend who recommended me as a potential buyer for his friend. So I had to go to Vancouver to collect this other kamcheng. And I had not seen it, and I had not felt it, so there was a large chance that I could have been scammed, right? So how do I have this leap of faith? And they wanted me to put up my money first. Oh dear. Sorry. So I haven't, okay. So but money first. So we had to create an escrow account in the lawyer's office here that would be transferred into his account when I saw the actual thing. So everything went quite smoothly, but this was a man from Penang who inherited the kamcheng and had brought it to Vancouver, where he retired and migrated to. And it was really like quite remote. And I didn't even know that they were a mirror pair until I brought them together. So it was a complete leap of faith. And what's special about this is that there are 9 goldfish in each of the inside of the vessels. So it's very special indeed. So I'm just going to go through some of the kamchengs that I think are quite special. So this is a very unusual color. It's often referred to as olive green. And the local Hokkiens would call it sai chair, which literally translates to dark poo green. This color is notorious for changing when you fire it. So what it starts out as and how it ends up after the firing can be entirely different. I suppose it's like the dark blue green. It could come out any color depending on what duck was eating. So this was found in Penang, and also it's quite common in the south as well. But you notice that there are no phoenixes here. They're just peonies. So it's also unusual that the phoenix is basically the symbol of the Nonias. So that's why I had this carving brought in to symbolize the Peranakan women or the Nonias. Yeah. Okay. So this is one of the prizes in the collection. It'll look very familiar to all of you because it's just 1 inch smaller than the famous kamcheng that Singapore uses to promote that Straits Chinese culture is more alive in Singapore than anywhere else in the world. So the larger example of this kamcheng was actually donated by a Penang family to the Singapore Museum. So it's known affectionately as the Kusu Biao kamcheng. And the interior is particularly interesting because not only has it got 9 goldfish, it's got amazing looking seaweed as well. So when you fill it with water, it looks like there's a whole aquascape happening down there. It's one of my favorite color combinations. The mulberry pink and the, sorry, that was the previous one. It's the mulberry pink and the chartreuse that, to me, those colors symbolize, what traditional Nonya colors are. Again, this is another example of a mirrored pair. You see why it's a mirrored pair? The phoenixes are looking at each other in the cartouche. So it's a really good way of like, if you want to acquire a pair, make sure that they are a mirrored pair. But I studied these very closely, and you can see that even with the same artist, they can't draw the phoenixes identically, because if you're right-handed, it's very difficult to draw the other side to make it look exactly the same. So the one on the, as you're looking at it, the one on the right looks a bit more emaciated than the one on the left. So, you know, having to produce the book, write the book, and also do the captions made me look at these things much more closely, and I did learn a lot along the way. Okay, these are a selection of my, what I call the smalls and the minis. So we have the giants and the small, the minis, and the average one. So the minis are quite cute, and the ones with the finials on it look especially amazing because to reduce the size of the food dog at the top to like half a centimeter is quite a feat. And when you actually see the work on it, it's really quite amazing. But unfortunately, the artwork on most of the mini kamchengs and the smaller ones are really not the best because I think they had apprentices working on them. And sometimes the design doesn't even fit into the cartouche. But still, I thought that they were used for playthings by kids, but I think they would have been too valuable to have been used by children. I think subsequently I found that they were used on the vanity as for rice powder and for rouge and hair oils. So now we move to the tinkats. This is another part of my permanent collection. And tinkats are not exclusively Nyonya or Straits Chinese because they are found in export ware as well. So when I talk about Straits Chinese porcelain, they were made specifically for the Southeast Asian market, and especially for the Straits Chinese families. The Straits Chinese porcelain was not sought after or not sold domestically because it just wasn't the Chinese taste. So in the tinkats, I collect what's in two major categories, and they are the polychromes here, which is basically different colors for each tier. They normally come in 4 tiers, and the monochromes. So in terms of the monochromes, the coral comes across as one of the rarest to find because coral is one of the most difficult colors to fire if you're firing porcelain. So I'm very lucky to acquire these sets all separately and individually over time. And I don't just source them in Malaysia or Penang. It's a global platform that I spend a lot of my time looking for these things. So part of the mission is not only to stop it from going out, it's also to bring them back home. So it's an example of how they can be used. I think I was very inspired by this because in the old days, they were used to serve dishes when there was no individual kitchen in family homes. So there would be a communal kitchen for the whole family, and that the dishes of the day would be going out to each household. So the size and the fineness of the porcelain would depend on how important the household was in relation to the matriarch or the patriarch of the family. So I was told that the most beautiful and fine sets were reserved for the mistresses. So here we have an example of Colin's amazing handiwork. And he always says it only takes 10 minutes. And I think that he's not very good with his timing. But it does, it looks like a sunflower or something like that, or when it's displayed. And I think that it's a credit to him that they're all spaced so evenly apart. So the blue and white collection, blue and white porcelain is probably more common in Straits Chinese households than the colored ones, mainly because they're more affordable and accessible. And also, they were essential part of the household because they were used for ancestor prayers and devotion. So, but I was told that the more basic ones, like what's called the batik ware or kitchen ching, were used in some of the households as everyday porcelain. You can see that this is how I've tried to make use of them on a contemporary table setting. And it really does work really well when you mix and match them. So I want to talk about the different designs. And there were only about 4 or 5 of the blue and white designs that were used and purchased by the Straits Chinese families. And I was told that it basically, a particular design denotes your socio-economic standing, and that you shouldn't buy anything that was way above your station in life. In fact, good manners actually states that you should buy one level below where you think you are. So I think, that's why this particular design is actually a 19th century copy of a 18th century design that was very popular during the Kangxi period. And it's called the Lingqi design. And I was told that, and it's true, I found them I bought them from families that had a lineage from the Kapitan Chinas. So I acquired my first set during the financial crisis when it was auctioned off in Bangkok. And it's still one of my favorites, even though I know it's not my station in life to own this, but it's for a higher cause. Okay, the blue and white kamchengs are much more utilitarian and not as expensive as the colored ones. Now, these were found in coffee shops, in households, and they were used for storing things like sugar, salt, flour, and the range of sizes is really quite astounding. But my favorites, of course, the smaller ones, because they have the most beautiful and cute food dogs on them. And I wanted to show how they were used for ancestor prayers. So this is one of the table settings for the dead rather than for the living. And, I've used the whole, this is called the Fine Batik series, the whole set of Fine Batik series on the table. And it's important to show this because I think if I had to ask any young person to set up a table for ancestor prayers, I don't know what it would look like today. Sweetmeat trays, again, is one of my permanent collections. Now, they are questionable as whether they're Straits Chinese. But as I said, I collect things that for pure beauty sometimes. And this is a great example of one. And while it was acquired from a very reputable auction house, I really didn't pay much attention to the chop marks behind it. Until one day when the learned Miss Lim Gexiang here took a look at it and said, "Did you know this is 18th century and made during the reign of the Emperor Yongzheng?" The Emperor Yongzheng is not very famous, had a very short reign, but he was the father of Qianlong. So by that association, he was very important. His reign was very important as well. And the fact that the artwork on this is so fine is miraculous that it has survived for the last 200, 300 years. So what are sweetmeat trays? Some people confuse and think that they're for offal, but no, they are for dried fruit and nuts. And originally, the Chinese name for this set of dishes is actually called a zhuanbua. Zhuanbua means a complete set of plates. And they were used at the end of a meal to serve fruit that was in season. Now, of course, in the northern part of China, in the winter, you could only serve dried fruit. And I think that that tradition was carried through the Lunar New Year, where it's always in winter. So the dried fruit was used to be displayed on this set of dishes. And it's also very interesting that the shapes also represent the lotus flower. Now, this is also another example of a rare example of a sweetmeat tray. But I think that they were not used as such for that purpose. I read that they were used to test the mental agility of the nobles. They would take them out and try and put them back together even in the same design. It's quite challenging, but I was told that they could be put back into a few different designs. And there's a word that for this configuration is called a tangram. So these are the more recognizable guachi trays. And these guachi trays are what you find during Chinese New Year in people's homes. But prior to that, I think in the older days, they were used to serve little refreshments for visitors in a grand household. So, you know, the different sizes would be meant for different numbers of guests. Sorry, this. Okay, so festive wear. Before I start here, I'm going to premise this by saying that I classify tableware in general for the Peranakan genre to be split into happy and sad china, I call them. So the happy china is this, and the sad china are the blue and white, because the blue and white is the closest color to black. And that was used for sad occasions, funerals, ancestral prayers, and all that sort of stuff. And this colorful tableware was used for celebrating weddings, birthdays, and other occasions, other happy occasions. The green is the most ubiquitous of the colored festive wear. It's still very expensive. And under the guise of heading of festive wear, I've included these sauce dishes that I collect. I collect a lot of different sauce dishes. And if you look at the leaf shape and the divided dish, it's also footed as well. It's amazing how much effort they put into a dish for some soy sauce and chilies. Now, this is also part of the dinner set that is called the cricket series. In Hokkien, it's called Chow Mei Kong. And I'm not sure Chow Mei Kong is actually cricket or cicadas, but they look pretty similar. If you look at the range of sizes of the bowls and the plates, this was not acquired as a set. It was acquired piece by piece. And it was made for the wedding of Lim Ket Chuan, who ordered the big kamchengs as well. So as you can see that he's very cultured and very wealthy in that time to order china that has his name at the back. Okay, so this is known as the more common Shanghai china, and it's what is used for weddings and other celebrations in Nonier households. And at that time, you could just buy them off the shelf. You didn't have to have special order, because this was probably around the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. And there was huge demand up to 1920s for this particular design. In my mind, they're not as fine as the earlier pieces, because as you can see, they're made in bulk. Although these are acquired not en masse, but you have to buy them piece by piece as well. Okay, my favorite festive wear is this particular design, and they're not phoenixes. I think they're pheasants here, or peahens, or something, but the china is of particular fineness, and it is made for, very rare, it's made for a woman. Her name's at the bottom, is Ku Jubi, and she was the first wife of the Kapitan China Zhang Taiping. And unfortunately, she died quite young, at the age of 45. I do research to find out what these, when I know the provenance, to find out more about these plates, and they were made for her wedding. So this is covered bowls are very prized in the whole collectors community because they're very rare. There are very few that were made, and fewer survived because it's very cumbersome to have those covers. And I just collect covers when I can, when I see them, because they're just so delicate and beautiful. And the covered bowls are much more used in Thailand by the Peranakans there, or even by the Thai community. I was always asking why. Why did they use more covered bowls there? Well, there might be more flies there than here. Maybe someone else can illuminate my question. But this is an example of all the different festive wear that you could find, or in my collection. I'm sure there are others, but it's also from families that I know in Penang. And my favorite is, of course, the powder blue series. And that is so unusual because I'm not sure whether it's sad or happy with such a blue color there, but it's only owned by one or two families, I was told, and the artwork on it is particularly beautiful. Okay, then we move on to altar pieces. The way I group them together is really to sort of give me license to add more things that I couldn't really justify on their own, to be on their own as a category. So these are what's called the what's the shape? Colin, what's the shape called? It's a quatrefoil. That's right. The quatrefoil shape, and these were made just for devotion to the deities. They're not used for everyday use or even for weddings. Again, the vases that were used for temples of the altars. And yes, I just wanted to speak about the lotus plates. So after looking at them very closely when writing the captions, I've concluded that they had the most beautiful artwork. It's like the Renaissance, when the artists were doing things for the church. These artists put in that extra effort because knowing that they were only used for during prayers to the Jade Emperor. So under the section of tea paraphernalia, and I love this photograph because look at all the colors. It's just phenomenal, all the colors. And it's not the complete collection because we just couldn't fit into the photograph. But it's just beautiful when seen en masse. Now, isn't that a stunning photograph by Nikki? Liquid in motion. So one of the big sections in the book is about the wedding chamber, which is such an important part of Straits Chinese culture. I collect these bed hangings that refer to basically fertility for the couple. So you see pomegranates there, you'll see butterflies. So all the insects and the flowers are busy at work at night, showing the couple what to do. So this is a Penang style wedding ensemble. And it's Penang because compared with the Malacca and Singapore wedding beds, it's the most ornate of all the different styles. I think mainly because Malacca was settled by the Chinese much earlier, and they held on to their Ming style traditions. And the Penang Chinese basically made their wealth in the late 19th century and had a much more esoteric approach to style, where they threw everything at it. So it's very over the top. And I was told that the number of panels that you can count on the bed head in the front, the helmet, denotes how fine the piece is. So on the left and the right are the bride and the groom's cabinets. Again, associated with the wedding chamber are these wedding baskets, and the red and gold and black basically tells you where you're from. So this color combination is only used in Fujian province, and it's used for ceremonial occasions and for exchanging gifts. I always tend to tell my friends that the gifts are for you, but not the basket. So I don't know why, but I've ended up with a lot of wedding beds that I'll never use. But why not? You know, they're just incredibly beautiful. So sometimes the guests come and they're very surprised that the guests at my hotels come and they're very surprised that, oh, wow, are these real? Well, they're as real as they can be because, you know, who would be crazy enough to make them now? Yes, so I tend to pepper them around the heritage hotels that we have in Georgetown. So again, a nice collection of, these are called scholars' cabinets. and they're much more found in Malacca than in Singapore than in Penang. Actually, they're not really local. So the mother of pearl collection is another huge section, and it's a big part of my collection. And I've shown this photograph to show how it was placed and used, typically in a terrace house in Georgetown, or this is in Georgetown. The Malacca style is slightly different again. Now, the mother of pearl inlaid furniture is a relatively new genre by Chinese standards. It was only found and created in the 19th century, and it's popular in Guangdong province in the south and in Vietnam. So the same skill set is transferable between the two, and sometimes it's difficult to tell where the furniture is from, because the Chinese-made ones are preferred by the collectors and also preferred by the Vietnamese collectors. So that's bragging rights about these being made in China. You can see that a full set of these is 8 chairs with the 2 console tables and a center pedestal table. Now, it's very hard to find a full set of these because they've normally been distributed within the families, but I was fortunate to have acquired them from the same family. Again, a nice grid of center pedestal tables, and there's no repeat there. So among the essential pieces of mother of pearl furniture are the benches and also the opium beds. Obviously, the opium beds are rarer. There are fewer of them. They're fewer made, and they're also difficult to place in today's home. So while they're beautiful and desired, it is not very practical. So I think that covers most of the sections of what is in the book, and I will now I'll now be subject to grueling by Gareth.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.
Can I get some mic? Hello, Chris, do you want to bring the mic? Your mic. So when we were planning this evening with Chris a few days ago, he said he'd speak for about 20 minutes or so on his collection. And so in light of that, I prepared a whole raft of interesting questions, which I'm not going to ask at all, because I think it's far more interesting for you, Chris, to hear some questions and contributions from the floor. And I do know that among the people here, there are also other collectors and people who have great passion and knowledge of antiques of different kinds. So I'll reserve some questions for you that in case the floor dries up. But I think one of the things that we'd all recognize and to once again acknowledge is the artistic design and place setting from Colin, but not least sitting here in the front row. And I brought him from the back row to the front row. The wonderful eye and artistry of Nikki Almasi, who took the photographs. And in a while, I'll ask Nikki. I'll ask Nikki to say something about the process that took. But could we have questions and/or contributions from the floor? I take it that there'll be a mic going around. And could you just very briefly say who you are so we know we're not talking to strangers? And while the mic's coming to you, I thought we'd get through an evening without mentioning the inauguration, but you spoilt it by mentioning the... But a far more consequential day, of course, in America, it's Martin Luther King Day. I think that's what we should also recognize. Yes, please, at the back.
Thank you. My name is Jumal, local native. I'm afraid of the youngest. So I'm here with the kamcheng and all. I just wanted to say, gratitude for what we've been doing the last few years in the exhibition. Like opportunity to see up close to the sweetmeat. The first one is the rather more emotional and personal experience. I suppose if you have opportunity, a brand up visiting today and have a look at all your collection, what do you think you should say today? What was the words?
You know what? Hello? Yes. You know what tiger mothers are like? Well, tiger grannies are the same. They would say it's not really good enough. Because they just want you to, improve and get better. And that's not a bad thing.
Good. And your second question?
My second question is, for you, myself, is really enthusiastic in this, for all of our collection, all of our Singaporeans. It's no Singaporeans. For me, I'm just myself, what are your suggestions, what are your recommendations, which are entry level countries for Peranakan collection?
This is Chris Ong as mentor.
Well, it depends on what entry-level budget you have. It's all relative. But I would say that, and I did the same thing, the first thing we ever collected that we could afford were the spoons. And spoons were sometimes free as well. So really, I suppose it's a question of demand and supply, right? And as I said earlier, there were more blue and white being found in households because they were found in most households. So I think that the blue and white is incredibly good value because sometimes it's cheaper than noritake. And it's not transferware. This is hand painted, hand drawn art from the 19th century.
There's a forest of hands. I'll take one here, and then I'll go to the mid distance. Yes, please. Can somebody help with the microphones, please? It really would make things smooth.
Mine is rather an idea contribution to democratize such a valuable collection of Chris Ong. I'm actually a historian by hobby, also a former lecturer in history, and I do Seberang Perai history in earnest for the past few decades. So my idea tonight, after such a wonderful collection has been well presented and well narrated, I think the whole idea of Peranakan cutlery and kitchenware would be of immense value to a certain generation only. Because like myself, we are from the 50s, post-Merdeka, and Chris maybe, and maybe Gareth. We do not have that much of recollection of these elitist ceramics. In current scenario, I just found the last few weeks that Hong Kong and various countries, they have used artifacts of this kind, ceramics of kitchenware of this kind, and also the ensemble of about 100 years for dementia patients, for the elderly, where they can recollect, relate, and connect the functional value of such a collection. So I'm trying to just propose such a novel way of making this relatable to the populace and also the coming generation by sharing, by more dissemination, and also more accessible of what you have tonight.
Thank you. I think it was a very interesting question about audience for who receives this kind of antique collection. Do you want to respond to that at all,
I
Chris?
don't really know what the question is.
I mean, I think there's a question of audience and reception of this particular genre of antiques, and it's a question that is raised with, I think, antique collecting all over the world. She seemed to be speaking to a generational divide. I mean, that's what you were saying, rather rudely, being ageist towards me, I have to say. Of course, elicits laughter in the cheap seats, as you would expect. But questions of curatorial practice, questions of documentation, and questions of exhibition, I think, are raised in this question. In other words, do you see yourself having a role as a kind of both a guardian of and a transmitter of a material culture that is, broadly speaking, in the historical past?
Well, that's why I did the book in the first place. I suppose to archive what I've got first. And, you know, I'm not from the generation that was using this, you know, it's my grandmother's generation.
He's not that old, madam.
I was curious about them as well. So I think, yes, it's wonderful if it works in helping to reverse dementia. I think it would be amazing. But, you know, it's making it accessible is not really practical, is it? Unless we make really good reproductions of it. And, you know, having a state museum that's open would be very useful.
Well, Chris, allow me. I wanted to pick up that was some of his earliest comments, and I think the critique is actually very well grounded, because he spoke about visiting the really wonderfully curated Peranakan Museum on Armenian Street in Singapore. And we know, I mean, Kenny Ting was here with us just a few months ago, who also had responsibility together with the Asian Civilizations Museum. So there's a generic question. Why does Singapore have such a deep and profound curatorial practice in place, both in its public museums and galleries, and of course, in its private museums and galleries? And I'm going to say this, and I know this is being live streamed, Penang lacks so much, especially in terms of its public gallery spaces. And frankly, we were approached yesterday to do a major retrospective of an artist, and we actually asked the question, so where were we going to show this? I mean, where are the purpose-built spaces? So there's a whole issue there. And then, of course, it's not merely about the physical spaces, it's about the curatorial practices and the arts management and all the rest of it. So as a critique of what we lack in Penang, in fact, we are beholden to private individuals like Chris, who does make his collection available, at least in a semi-public way. I mean, at Seven Terraces, of course, and in some of the other hotels. What would your message be, since we're being live streamed to all the Adun, whose salaries we pay through our taxes? What would your message be to putting Penang really on the map in relationship to museology and gallery making?
Well, I suppose there are more important things that the government is concerned about. Art is for the elite, as many people would say. And it reflects the status of the development of a country. I think ultimately that's what it is. When you have to focus on the necessities and the infrastructure before you aspire to higher things.
That's a really sad indictment. I would definitely take issue with your statement that art is for the elite. Any of you who've been to Singapore National Art Gallery, Singapore Museum, or Asian Civilizations Museum will know they're very well patronized. And above all, young people go there, school children go there on outings. So there's a whole ecosystem there and a whole mentality, I think, that really says this is of value intrinsically and for itself. It's not a transactional relationship, it's of itself. And I think that's something to be commended. But of course, we have to deal with tin-eared politicians. So, I mean, but we'll keep pressing, I think.
I think also that even if the public sector was to get this going in a very short period of time, we have lost about a decade or two of capability to display and curate whatever is left in the collection.
But that shouldn't be an excuse to not push forward. I mean, yes, there are lost decades and so on. There was a hand, yes, in the middle, please.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Chris. I have a technical question. The colors are absolutely spectacular, of course, but you mentioned that coral is particularly difficult. And I'm curious whether there's been any research or recording of the various chemicals and minerals that go into creating all of these colors.
I am not in a position to be able to answer those technical questions because I collect based on visuals rather than on the technical and academic viewpoints. I seldom would go into understanding how the colors were made. As long as they look pretty, I'll buy them.
But it's a worthwhile area of research
Yes,
and investigation. I think that if
The
you bring-
browns and the corals are notoriously difficult to fire, apparently. But they have amazing university at in Qingdezhen, and I've had professors visiting from there, and I might send the question to them.
I think it's a very interesting area to explore. There must be other questions, and also I'm looking at the front row in particular to other collectors. I guess I have a generic question, which is, what is the impetus? Ronnie, I'm talking to you as well. What's the impetus? What's the passion that drives this rather obsessive sense of the collector? I mean, you spoke of your grandmother and the particular spark, if you like, the catalyst in its origins. But what creates this sense of madness, this accumulation, and so on? I'm interested. I mean, it's a kind of mania.
It's a disorder.
Yes, it's a kind of mania, but an interesting mania. Ronnie.
Chris mentioned that the hand was thing inside. Something that's more difficult to get, gives more satisfaction. Wiring it. The pursuit, that was the word. I think that's part of the mania.
But it's also a trap to be scammed. If you're always in pursuit of the rare and the unusual, then you're setting yourself up to be scammed. Because if no one has ever seen them before and they're one-offs, then it's very hard to authenticate that it existed before.
You also mentioned that you wanted to back Singapore. You wanted to keep pieces here in Penang.
I think it's difficult to battle Singapore, but I can do only that much compared with the coffers of the Asian Civilizations Museum and the Ministry of Arts. I met a few of the curators, and they have 15 curators at the ACM. So, you know, how do we even start? Where is that expertise here anyway?
Maybe what I'm here, and I've got my those Churita Dulu books, do you happen to have a collection of them? I find those.
Oh, Teresa Dulu's. No, I don't. I don't collect literature on Peranakan literature.
Ronnie, can you not encourage him to start collecting other things as well, please?
No, we've got to keep it.
It's true, but we need the curatorial practices. We need the young people who are coming. You know, Singapore have places like NAF and La Salle or whatever, who are turning out first-class generations of curators across the board, and you know we don't. So on.
Well, I remembered having, you know, excursions to the Penang State Museum when I was in school here, and I don't know where they would go. School kids now, where would they go to see museums in Penang? None.
They don't.
Hmm.
Ronnie, you've had the mic for 10 minutes. Okay, one more. No, one more.
No, I just wanted to add a point. The lady was talking about the applications today, previously.
Use your mic.
So on. It's a heritage collection. It's a record of a particular time, and such a large collection that it's valuable because there are very few that match. And in the end of the day, magic ends up with the museum. You think of Singapore Jade Museum, right? Or Woon Home family, and so on. I mean, it's of that order of that. I don't think you could put down the value and importance of cultural heritage, particularly with the Peranakan, which is so interesting and so much.
Thanks, Ronnie. Do I take some more? Surely there must be some more from the floor. No, Joanne.
Chris,
Hi.
Joanne. I have a question about the one that got away. Was there a piece at any point that got away? They didn't make it quite. None of that story.
There are many sad stories. I ravish drama and sadness. Of course, when I look at all the things that I've put in bids for on the international stage, and I didn't go that extra bit, you know, you look back and you regret, but I think there's no point in regretting. You just wait for the next one to come up, because there's so many things out there that you could acquire. It's a question of priorities, right? Yes, I totally agree with you that even in the last 12 months, I look back at all the bids that losing bids. But I think I've learned my lesson that if it's something that fits into my collection, and because I've got so much more now, I don't have to buy that many. So the marginal piece that comes up is very important that I get it so that it completes or it rounds up my collection.
He's a follower of the great Edith Piaf. No regrets. No regrets. There must be some more questions. Come on, this was such a fantastically stimulating talk. If not, Nicky, I just like Nicky sitting in the front row. He was the photographer, and I think he deserves a couple of minutes. Nicky, just to reflect on the process of making the book, the kind of aesthetic choices, the visual language that you adopted, and so on. Just share some of that with us, would you?
Shall I come up or please? Okay. It's a difficult question, Gareth, but all I wanted to say is that I had a talk here a couple of months ago at the Penang Institute, and I talked about how I have this weird obsession with architecture and architects, and actually the intersection of an interesting person and buildings or whatever behind that, and I had a couple of great projects in Shanghai and Bangkok, and after that, when I came to Penang, I met Chris, and Chris really inspired me. So he's not an architect per se, but he beautifully, shapes and forms his buildings and environment, and that's what inspired me. And later, first I took photographs of the hotels, and then it came to the collection, when we started to collaborate closely. So it just basically inspired, and yeah, it was such a privilege and to document this, and also I'm so grateful to Chris and also Colin that I got to learn so much about this. That's why it was very special. About the technical part of the photography, I don't know what to say. It came, it was very spontaneous. We started to collaborate, work together, and then I think it all started. I don't know if you remember with those grids. It all started there. So the book started there somewhere. We just started to collect everything together, and then it all, shaped up. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I love the collages. They have a particular, it's far better than Andy Warhol's Campbell soup cans or 9 versions of Mao Zedong. But in particular, the more dynamic photographs, for example, when you have the collection of teapots, yes. And as Chris rightly said, the single image of the tea pouring, I mean, that's a beautiful and
thank you.
So thank you, and also thank you once again to Colin.
Definitely,
for the work that you did on the book. We could wrap up in a moment, but is there a one last? Yes, please.
You had has it given you an edge over the other collectors experienced back?
I think being a banker and having a sizable bank account is not necessarily correlated. But I do try and justify the price and the value of things. But sometimes you can't. You just have to close your eyes and buy them.
Definitely, I think a far more important skill than being a banker would be he's a really ace poker player, because that's, he doesn't want to be scammed. So he mustn't show he's too enthusiastic or indeed too desperate. He needs to play Mr. Cool. I haven't got that good a hand, but he's playing like that. So I think Chris should be a very, very good poker player. Yeah.
I never gamble.
He never gambles. He gambles every time he buys a piece, I think. Anyway, is there one more, a last one? Anita, you look like you're dying to ask me a question. Any more? For any more? So are we all done? Okay, so there's a little commercial announcement. The book Duri is selling the books, and Jun-san, I'm really, really sorry. We'll give you a 30 ringgit discount. So the book's at 280, which is really, really very reasonable for the production qualities that you'll have. And if you get a second book, there's a discount, it's 250. Listen, you just say to all the young people in your family, this year there is no ang pao for you, but instead I'm giving you a beautiful book, which you will treasure, and you won't fritter away this ang pao on some nonsense in Gurney Plaza. So I would it leaves me to say thank you very much once again to the team at Penang Institute. Thank you. And thank you all. And above all, please give a very warm thank you to Chris Ong. Thank you. The poker player will be signing the books here at the front. So form an orderly queue. I think that's the word. Okay.